Fossils and Fiction, a show about ancient life, paleontology, and the stories we tell. The show is produced by me, Travis Holland, on Wiradjuri country with the support of Charles Sturt University. Enjoy! This episode is part 2 of our discussion about the Jurassic Park book, New Perspectives on the Classic 1990s Blockbuster. The book is edited by Dr Matt Melia, published by Bloomsbury, and part 1 featured a chat with Matt and contributor Peter Kramer. This time, I chat with Dr Catherine Pugh and Dr Ross Garner about their chapters. Catherine, welcome to Fossils and Fiction. The Jurassic Park book is a comprehensive study of this film, and I wanted to have a chat about your chapter, which analyzes a play that kind of riffs on the film. So you didn't write about the film itself, but the play riffs on the film and its importance to family, to a particular family, the Parks. Can you tell me a little bit about the play?
Yeah, so it's called The Jurassic Parks. It is a 3-person play. There's only 3 actors. There's no set. There's very few props. It's a comedy drama done by an international theatre group called Superbolt. And the audience, when they come in, they're greeted by Terry Parks and his teenage children, Jade and Noah. And what they think they're going to be putting on is a memorial screening of Jurassic Park for the children's mother, Terry's ex-wife, Madeline, who was a paleontologist. It was a favourite film of theirs. They've got a lot of emotion invested in it. And they think they're going to be putting it on for the audience. And then it turns out that the tape is missing. So all these tensions within the family start to bubble to the surface. And eventually they decide to stage the play themselves rather than showing it. And as the story of the film is going on, you have snippets of the family life in reverse chronological order, showing how the family goes back to being a united family. And then at the end of the play, they all come together and it's all lovely and everything's wonderful. But they reunite through this session.
What messages about family and family dynamics sort of link the play and the film together for you? How do they work hand in hand?
It's very the film is very invested in nuclear families, very hegemonic nuclear families, and there's quite a dismissal of, in the original films anyway, there's very much a dismissal of anything that doesn't fit within that. Ellie and Grant are arguing about having children. Tim and Lex, their parents are divorced. Ian and Grant are more invested in the dinosaurs than their children, or potential children. So there is this idea of forming or reforming a family into the white heteronormative nuclear family with very traditional gender roles for everybody in it. And also the idea of families out of control. So the dinosaurs breeding when they're not meant to be, for example, and this sort of proliferation. So everything in the original, certainly in the book and in the movie, tries to bring the family back into this very contained traditional role. I don't think that's necessarily the case with the later films, the Jurassic World films, but in the original trilogy, certainly in the original film, it's trying to bring this back. In the play, there's a similar idea, except it does seem to be a little bit healthier. In the play, it's reforming this family, but it's not reforming a traditional family. It's reforming the family as it is and accepting each other, communicating. Within the family, there's a big lack of communication that has what's caused them to become estranged and fall apart. And Jade's about to leave, and Noah's been ignored, and even things like the dietary requirements in the family, the dad doesn't know it. So as the play continues, they kind of get to know each other again and reconnect through their griefs, but they are able to access this grief through staging the play. There's this big collision in the film and in the play about past and present colliding in order to unite the family.
I've seen that analysis of Jurassic Park previously about its kind of One of its arcs is creating that nuclear family out of Grant and Sattler and the two kids, and turning him into a father figure, whereas he openly wasn't that early on. So yeah, it's interesting that people would take that and make it the basis for another work in a way. What challenges do you think the playwrights faced in adapting a movie like Jurassic Park, which is a big screen film in the biggest sense of the word, for literally for a small stage? How did they do that? Because they kind of restaged it, right, as part of the play.
Yeah, so they um obviously just the sheer, like you say, the sheer scale of it, trying to get it down to something that they can physically put on a small stage. And obviously there's no CGI, there's puppetry, but there's not this detailed program animatronics that they use in the film. There's no no special effects, everything has to be brought down to a smaller scale. They bring everything down to a more intimate level, and it brings this sense of play and inventiveness, innovation, and a lot of the comedy of the play itself comes from this supposed scrambling that the characters have to do to try, sort of, okay, well, how do we make a T-Rex then? And they have a backpack, so they grab a backpack, and that becomes a T-Rex attendant mouse. And they do dramatic lifts in order to try and get the scale. But by basically saying to the audience, we can't do this, we're going to do it through play and imagination right from the off, it grants access to that big spectacular world. But they know they're not trying to put a spectacle on the stage. They are trying to put a very personal story on the stage. But to do that, they do it through these big things. But also, it means that they have to be very, very inventive, both the actors and the characters. So the Velociraptor in the kitchen scene, for example, they can't stage that. Even with, they have lighting and sound effects, obviously, but they're never going to get that level of terror and tension just doing it with the three of them on a blank stage. So what they do instead is they restage a sort of arcade fight scene, sort of Mortal Kombat style fight scene. And by sort of saying to the audience, we're going to do it this way, the audience will fill in the gaps because they know the movie. But it means that there's this shared language that everyone can have access to. And it brings the story not only to an accessible point, but to a point where you don't need the spectacle. The joy of the show isn't necessarily in the spectacle, it's in the inventiveness. Having said that, they can do spectacle on stage very, very well. I mean, the Dilophosaurus scene, that is a very, very tense scene when they do it on stage, and they do that through the actress playing Jade plays the dinosaur, and one of the other actors is behind her with an umbrella. So when she attacks, they both the scene not very, very tense, but when she attacks, the umbrella comes out and acts as a shield. So you have this absolute moment of comedy and inventiveness and terror all in one. And I think that's what makes it work. It just invites you into this sense of, we want to play. It's not a film that you watch and take deadly seriously. It's a film that is funny at times. It's very scary. It's very funny. It's very bittersweet. And the other thing is how they put the dinosaurs on. Depending on which dinosaur it is, some of them are active physically. Some of them they simply react to. Some of them, they puppet like the T-Rex with the. This is I'm just laughing. The thought of that scene where one of the actors has lifted the other one. She's got a backpack on her hand, being the mouth, and they're chasing the other poor actor around the stage, and Blondie is playing in the background. And it's that thing of it would never work on film, but that scene would never work on a small stage the way that it was in the film. So they just go, okay, we can't do that. We're going to play instead.
It's a really interesting adaptation, and I was glad when you reached out and said you were happy to have a chat as part of my sort of series about the Jurassic Park book, because I think this notion of the way that the film has been adapted, there's a lot of these kind of faithful adaptations floating around,
Mm.
where they're kind of stage shows or puppets or whatever it happens to be, which feature animatronics and feature these kind of trying to bring the Jurassic Park experience out into the world. But then there's lots of other adaptations, and that's had a real influence on culture as well. And I think it's interesting the way that Jurassic Park has become this catalyst for some of these adaptations and that kind of thing, and including this play, which is kind of a form of telling the story that probably the filmmakers would never have anticipated or could never have anticipated. So it sounds like a really nice, interesting piece of work, and at the same time, an interesting part of that cultural phenomenon of adaptation. Do you think there's something about this film that's caused that impact in culture? Why is it so open to adaptation, or why has it influenced culture in that way?
I mean, some of it is, I personally think, it's down to the aesthetical, and now some of it is nostalgia. I mean, even before the kind of, I mean, my background's in horror, and there's a lot of a trend of 70s, 80s, even we're up to the 90s now of kind of horror coming back and being redone or revisited. But even before that, there is this pure spectacle of the film. And I think at the time it was done, there wasn't anything like it. And it
Mhm.
has a perfect blend of physical puppetry and animatronics and CGI. And I think a lot of that has been lost now in more current movies, where CGI is the dominant effect used. And there is something very magical about puppetry where you can touch it and you can see it and it's real and it has a visceral feeling to it. And so you have CGI to enhance it rather than taking it over. And I think that is something that we've lost and that people are very fond of in terms of filmmaking. There isn't anything quite like it. Um, I mean, there's just the story is so engaging as well. And I mean, as you've got to remember as well, it's a Frankenstein story at its heart. It's very old
Mhm.
Gothic, and those stories have been fascinating audiences for centuries. Where we are always going to be interested in sort of ethics and practicalities and the potential monstrousness of reanimation and all the things that it suggests. And these themes of kind of monstrous doppelgangers, reanimation, progeny, cloning, all the technology, all these things come back again and again and again, and they, we are, yeah, but they'll come back in different forms. And I mean, even sort of when Jurassic Park came out, it was more cloning. It was around the time of Dolly the sheep. It was very technology of reproduction and IVF and things like that. Now sort of Frankenstein and Frankensteinian things are popping up with things like AI and
Mhm.
rewilding, as you see in the later movies as well. And just these things will keep coming up as we progress. Fears of technology, fears of nature, fears of um, just the other are always going to be there, and they will
Yeah.
keep going back. And the intervention of humans on the natural world is always going to scare people. I don't know why.
You mentioned no, yeah, no, that was great. You mentioned horror there as well, and your kind of horror expertise and background. You also published an article recently on eco horror, which was part of, I think, the collection that kind of accompanies the book as well. And so you were talking about eco horror in Jurassic Park. Can you introduce me to this notion of eco horror? What does that entail?
So in the Jurassic Park ones, you have eco horror and you have animal horror as well. They relate to each other, but they're two separate things. Horror is much more about this is the revenge of nature or a rebalancing. So decentering the human from the environment. You get revolt of nature films, which look at all this balancing out and revenge of revenge eco horror films where people are trying to take over and reclaim and eradicate humans. But you find that in Jurassic Park with more the environment. So the dinosaurs, even though they are the most actively destructive thing in the film, they are agents of eco horror and of revenging nature. They're not kind of doing it themselves. They don't have that agency. But the environment itself is very indifferent and very antagonistic. I mean, it doesn't care if it's hurting the humans or the animals. You have the scene with the Triceratops and the West Indian lilac. In the book, it's confirmed that the Triceratops has actually eaten the West Indian lilac, even though in the film it's left a bit ambiguous. So nature doesn't care if it hurts. I mean, in the later films, the whole island is wiped out by a volcano. Nature just doesn't care about any of its creatures. It just wants to control, and you see the parks are overgrown and taken over again. But the dinosaurs are more, in my opinion anyway, are more akin to animal horror, where animals they're either bestowed this kind of ethical agency and advocacy where they can act as a punishing force, or they can act as they just want to destroy and to eat. So the whole thing revolves around decentering the human and putting nature and animals first.
It's a really interesting take, because obviously the questions around nature and how we treat and deal with nature and those kinds of things have always been there in Jurassic Park and always analysed. But to put it in that framework of this isn't just about our carelessness as such, but also potentially this bigger theme of nature fighting back in a way. And even in Jurassic Park, a big part of the reason that the park failed was the hurricane that was coming through, the tropical storm. So while there was also a hurricane on the other island that sort of caused destruction there too. So they do keep coming back to these natural disasters as central to the storytelling.
Yeah,
in the Jurassic Park franchise.
Nature just comes back as a destabilizing element in order to mess up these hierarchies and give the dinosaurs a chance to take over and to fight back. And I mean, what's something that you don't see really in any of the films is, I mean, in the Jurassic World films, you see the dinosaurs off the island, but you don't see the environmental impact until Dominion, really, with the locust subplot. But there is a question of, well, what if some of the seeds from some of the prehistoric plants got on the clothing, ended up back in the mainland? There's a whole question of that destabilization, that environmental impact that doesn't get looked at. It's all based on the dinosaurs, rightly so in a way, because they are the star attraction. That and Jeff Goldblum doing the pose, those are the two star attractions of the festival. We can't forget that. It's a very important point that it's spectacle and it's but the dinosaurs have to be the star, but there are wider questions being asked about the wider impact of bringing dinosaurs. It's not just they're going to eat you, they're going to hurt you, they're going to chase you. We do like a bit of that. I do like a bit of that in horror in the Jurassic. If we had a Jurassic Park without anyone getting eaten, it would be terrible. We expect that, but it opens the gate for other questions as well.
And it's always more impactful when they are people we know, that people that have a name or have had some lines as well. It's kind of,
or the dog.
It's played for comedy. Yeah, well, the dog.
The shame.
In The Lost World.
In the play, there is a moment that is not directly referenced, but there is a moment where one of the actors just lies in the Jeff Goldblum position and just kind of goes, Jeff Goldblum. And there's always a little, this very radically different scheme.
Yeah.
But again, with the dinosaurs eating people, it's completely defaming that hierarchy and turning people into meat, turning them from subject to object. And whereas the films always start with the dinosaurs as the object. We want to look at them. It's wonderful. And by the end of it, it's humans just meat, and the dinosaurs are the predators. And every time sort of flashes of the film go through my head.
And you almost can't help but quote it, which is what I'm about to do. And they always give these lines, it seems, to Jeff Goldblum, but there's that line in The Lost World where he says, ooh, that's how it always starts, and then later there's running and screaming. That reflects that transition you're talking about, the changing subjective position of the human characters from the people doing the watching to the people becoming the objects to be hunted or chased.
And I mean, they give all the kind of portentous loans they give to Jacob. I think he's the one who also says he makes the connection between sort of science and all the science that they're doing and this destructive curiosity that they have. Between that and a child wielding a gun with that you don't know what forces you're dealing with. Later on in the Jurassic World films, he says something like, we are subservient to nature. So while Hammond is trying to make this very ethical argument that, we can use this technology to bring back endangered species or extinct species, he talks about the condors, and he doesn't see, he's absolutely incapable of seeing that danger of this can be used in very destructive and dangerous ways. And these creatures, I think it's, again, Jeff Goldblum, I never refer to his character as always Jeff Goldblum. It's like he's not Malcolm, he's Jeff Goldblum. He's saying that dinosaurs had their time and they should be left alone. Which does once they kind of, in the original trilogy and in the later films, they do eventually kind of come to this very uneasy truce of we are going to leave each other alone. There's this, okay, the balance of power has been disrupted, but we can coexist, but we need to be separate. And then, obviously, in the later films, dinosaurs come back into the so-called civilized world, so they are no longer able to be separated. But you do end the actual series so far ends on this note of kind of coexistence with dinosaurs traveling with native wildlife, and it ends on quite a positive, promising note. But for how long we don't know.
And we'll have to see what comes along in this mooted Jurassic Park 7, which is for only a year away, evidently. So we'll see. Do you think that there's much, this term monstrification has been thrown around a lot in relation to Jurassic Park, often in a sort of pejorative sense, that the dinosaurs are played as monsters more than animals. Do you think that has occurred in Jurassic Park, and is it a problematic thing to do for filmmakers?
I think there's always a question in all the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World films of what the animals are. I think Christy Tidwell talks about how the dinosaurs are feared as monsters, but there's an appeal about them as animals. And even the characters can't seem to agree on whether they are animals or monsters. So in the first film, Grant tells the children, no, they're just animals, they're following their instincts. And yet he treats the Brachiosaurus as pets. And he's like, they could still bite you. They could still, poor Lex with getting sneezed on. It's not that it hurts there, but it can't be pleasant. There are still dangers in these sort of more domesticated, isn't quite the right word, but domesticated animals. And you see children riding the baby Triceratops in the Jurassic World films. And yet in the same film, in the Jurassic World film, Owen Grady is able to integrate with the animals, but he very quickly, there are scenes where he talks about the Indominus Rex, and he's going, "That's not an animal. That is a monster. It's not behaving as an animal." So there is this conflict between, yes, they are dangerous animals, but they are behaving as animals. They are following their instincts. They're hungry. They want to feed. The classic line of the T-Rex doesn't want to feed, he wants to hunt. And yet they are very much treated as monsters. I mean, it just in horror sense, the way they're framed, these close-ups of the eye, the darkness, they're always in darkness. Particularly in Fallen Kingdom, it's very, very, very gothic. You have an Indoraptor on the roof, basically roaring at the moon. It has this lovely gothic scene of the hand creeping over the bed, and it's very horror. They are framed within horror. But there is always, while they are seen as animals, they are seen as controllable. Once they become monsters, that's when they are the threat. But you also, at the same time, even when they're being treated as monsters, you see them act in animal ways, in quite empathetic ways. You see at the end of The Lost World, you see the T-Rex teaching the little baby how to hunt, ignoring the fact that they are hunting a human. It wasn't most human, so it's fine. It's have no moral quandaries with that whatsoever. It's quite a sweet bonding moment for the family. It's just we just ignore the fact that it's a human. And again in Fallen Kingdom, that empathy is brought in a lot more as the films progress. So it seems to me that the more augmented and human the dinosaurs become, the more dangerous they are. They become more uncanny, they become more dangerous. The velociraptors learn to open doors. They learn trickery and deception. But, and then once you get into the later films, they kill for fun rather than for food. The exception is the velociraptors, particularly Blue, because as the films progress with that, she gains more human attributes. She becomes more empathetic. She's shown to have human emotions and desires and a bond. So with her, as the exception, her humanness makes her more appealing to the audience, whereas the rest of them, it makes them more uncanny. That's a whole separate thing. But the other thing with the dinosaurs as well, going back to sort of animal horror and eco horror, they are very much used, I think, with maybe one exception or two exceptions, as they are agents of punishment, and they are almost exclusively used to kill characters we don't like. The worse the character, the worse the death. There, like I said, there are exceptions, particularly the very, very, very nasty death in Jurassic World of the character who's sort of stuck with stuck with the kids, and
Zara,
Zara, thank you. That's very, and I mean, fans hated it as well. It's very telling that everyone went, she didn't deserve that, and it's a particularly nasty death. And the other one is one of the characters in The Lost World, and off the top of my head, they're the only ones I can think of that they were generally benevolent characters that get killed. Everybody else, De Niro, everybody. Sorry, I have missed one more off. Samuel L. Jackson's character. How can I forget Samuel L. Jackson's character? I think because you don't see it on screen, it tends to.
Yeah.
They are there to punish people for transgressions and infractions and violence, and that kind of, I think that's maybe one of the reasons why we quite like seeing people getting eaten on screen in that concept, because it's not very nice to say, but it is kind of fun to watch. And also we get to go, yeah, you deserve that, Nedry, come on.
Yeah. You get Nedry, and then in Jurassic World, Vic Hoskins, of course, as well. So often the characters are the one that are eaten are the kind of hunter characters, the ones that think they can control the animals. In particular ways, or that can use them for their own ends quite often as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's absolutely that, and that's where this sense of plot armor comes from. That you're never going to see Alan Grant, or even in Dominion. You know, there was that moment where I think the most logical choice for the filmmakers would have been to kill off Jeff Goldblum,
Yeah.
to have Ian Malcolm
But you can't
eaten
kill
by
Jeff
the
Goldblum.
Giganotosaurus. But in retrospect, they were never going to do it. You know, I personally, I would have. I think they should have, but just to give gravitas to that moment.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
true.
that.
Yeah, I mean, it does very much. There are times where you go, this is what we feel like you should, and critically, what you should do this as a fan, or or as someone who just wants a fun
Yeah,
movie. Yeah, you can't do that to something. I
yeah.
mean, there is that wonderful, wonderful moment where when Gennaro gets eaten and the T-Rex head shoots through the bathroom wall, and it's just Jeff Goldblum's just riding the T-Rex head. If
Mm,
you watch that,
yeah.
he just touched the head, and it's one that only Jeff Goldblum could ride a dinosaur head through a bathroom wall and end up absolutely fine. And just fantastic. I love that moment
Yeah.
so much.
Well, look, if he didn't have that moment, we wouldn't have his convalescence later on. So
This is true. It was a price he had to pay for looking so wonderful in repose. Yeah, and talking about sort of animals as monsters in general, yeah, there is a danger of it being generalized, and yeah, but animal horror is a bit strange in that, as I say, the animals in animal horror tend to be anthropomorphized in that they are granted human motives, human desires, revenge in particular, that you wouldn't necessarily find in animals in the world. Of course, there are still. I mean, there's a Gustav the crocodile alligator. I'm not sure. Who has killed, well, supposedly killed hundreds of people, but certainly has killed dozens. And they've made films about that. But their point there is these examples in real life. But of course, you have the knock-on effect of certain animals being portrayed as actively monstrous and malevolent. I'm sure as Matt can tell you all about, Jaws, and the effect that had on people. Well, just very bad press for sharks. They did not come out of that film well, and there are records of shark attacks tripling in intervening years, even though in actuality shark attacks are very rare and sharks tend to stay away from humans. I mean, and it's initially that's not going to happen with dinosaurs for obvious reasons. But there's a danger of the animal becoming not only over anthropomorphized, but also overseered. But unfortunately, there are always
yeah,
going to be
and
animals
then
that,
that obviously has some consequences.
and environmentally in particular. But there are always going to be animals that
Mm.
we as humans find uncanny and scary, particularly insects, spiders, anything with big teeth that's bigger than us. It is interesting how, again, once we start, it's when we put human attributes onto animals that we start to fear them, as well as our kind of innate wariness of things that could eat us, or things that are very, very clearly othered and strange to our eyes anyway. But I mean, having said that, in animal horror, I mean, dogs are really prevalent in animal horror. The difference between sort of the companion dogs of horror and the aggressive attack dogs of animal horror are, they're the same animal, very, very, very different framing.
I mean, this is kind of one of the things that I've tried to do with this podcast as much as possible, is take the idea of prehistoric animals, and particularly, I guess, dinosaurs, and see how they manifest or are shaped by culture as much as they are by science and scientific endeavor. And so I do vary between talking to paleontologists about their research and then talking and thinking about it from a cultural studies perspective, and how does this stuff actually play out, and how does it link up with other um, animals and creatures. So,
There is that change within the films where they start off with the dinosaurs are never natural at all, right from the off. The original ones are made with frog DNA as well as dinosaur DNA. They are never ever pure dinosaurs. And as the films progress, there is this recurring theme of one hand trying to make them more marketable. I mean, there's that line in Jurassic World: "You didn't ask for realism, you asked for more teeth." So they're intentionally moving away from reality, and of course we don't know what dinosaurs really look like. We probably never will. All we have are the bones and fossils. But then in the final films, there is this move back towards I think what they call pure dinosaurs in where they're trying to use more DNA, and the dinosaurs on screen have got feathers, and so there's an attempt on the part of both the scientific characters in the movies and the filmmakers to bring back this reality. So they sort of have this curve of completely unnatural dinosaurs to augmented dinosaurs that are very much sci-fi and very almost cyborgs in their presentation, where they are behavioral conditioned, they have psychological conditioning, they are super strong and super fast and the genetic hybrids, and they almost comes back to this. No, we need natural. We need all sorts of a kind of toxic naturalism, where it's we want them natural, but not that natural. We still want to be able to control it. So even the dinosaurs in the last film that are supposedly as close to real dinosaurs as they could get have got behavioural conditioning that when they hear certain sounds, they will go to certain places. Things like that. So there is a massive tension in the film between the real and the illusion, and I mean, kind of going back to the play almost. I mean, in the film, Hammond says very early on, he talks about his bee circus, and the idea of, is theatre an illusion? Is illusion kind of the letting go, intentional letting go of reality? And this comes up again and again and again within the film, but also that's how the play works. Because you you're not watching a movie, you have to be invested in the world of the play in order for it to work. And with the dinosaurs, you have to be able to let go of the reality of, you cannot watch that film and go, that's not what a dinosaur looks like.
because you have Grant in Jurassic Park 3 giving a lecture where he says, they're not dinosaurs, they're monsters that were created. And then, in Dominion, they bring that debate back again with those, as you say, with the claims on screen and by the scientists that these are real. They're not, they're not hybrids, whatever. And so it feels like the filmmakers took the debates that have happened out there in the fandom and in the critical realm and put those on screen. They've used it to inform the script to sort of talk back to the audience in some ways.
They do come up with some interesting debate. So on the one hand, they are action-packed spectacle, action movies, but once you start digging into it, because they have that science fiction element, they naturally engage with all these different arguments about life and technology and nature and all these great things. So you can just watch them as an action film and really enjoy it. And I love watching the films, and just watching them as a movie and watching them as a cool story with, interesting things happening. But, there's also this other layer where if you start digging into it, you can find all these really, really interesting debates. And as you say, they adapt as time go, the kind of the debates in the final film are not the same as the first film. Even though there are common threads that continue through all of them, they're not the same ones. They don't have the same viewpoint. They change as kind of not only kind of scientific advances change, but also, as you say, fan opinion changes and informs. I mean, even like saying with Zara's death, the filmmakers have gone on record saying we shouldn't have done that. We're not doing that again. I think when Fallen Kingdom came out, I think there was one of the filmmakers said something like, "There isn't a death in this that isn't earned." She said, your kid's not going to die.
So they
then.
kind of learned that lesson.
The way they treat children, and Lex and Tim are very. There are these debates about them being what's the phrase, improperly gendered, and by the end of it, they are back where they quote unquote should be. Whereas, Maisie in the latter films, she's a hybrid. She's a clone. She's very much linked to the technology that they're bringing in. So it's not about children being kept in traditional roles or any character being kept in traditional roles. There's much more of this kind of freedom of expression and identity that wasn't there before. So the arguments, I think, move with the times, even though the same arguments were kept. But we've been having these same arguments for hundreds of years in our literature and in science, and it engages a bit differently.
What's perhaps different? I mean, science fiction in general often does this, but a lot of films, people will read the tea leaves and make these analyses. But Jurassic Park series does engage with this stuff on screen. The characters have these arguments. They debate each other, which is not especially common, I think. To have that kind of meta debate going on. The other complication with Lex and Tim, of course, is that they are gender swapped from Crichton's book. So the discussion about them sort of being, as you say, improperly gendered, and I don't think that's not your term. There's another scholar out there who's used that term for them.
That is a scholarly term someone's used. Unfortunately, it was the help with them credit, but yes, it's not my.
I'll look it up and I'll make sure I include it in the show notes. But I know the paper you're talking about. Absolutely, I've read it and I think cited it myself. But that is a further complication, right? That Spielberg swapped them around in the casting process somewhere, rather than it being built into the text from the ground up. So, really interesting conversation, Catherine. Thanks for having a chat about your chapter, Family, Nostalgia and Dinosaurs on Screen, and also your article, The Jurassic Park Franchise, Eco Horror and the Devouring Gothic. I'll make sure people have access to both of those in the show notes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Ross Garner, and I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Journalism, Media and Culture at Cardiff University. A lot of my research looks into spatial experiences of media brands and other elements such as fandom, collecting, and other things that are linked to kind of spaces or material cultures surrounding audiences and fandoms.
And this is the second time I've had you on Fossils and Fiction. The first time we talked generally about a lot of your work looking at museums and dinosaur fandom.
Yes.
But this time it's because you've contributed to the Jurassic Park book. I've spoken to the editor, Matt Melia, and a number of the other contributors, and I've read the book, and I found it to be a really fascinating mix of analysis, and even surprisingly, for 30 years worth of scholarship, some new takes on Jurassic Park. Is there anything across the book that stands out for you in terms of the contributions?
It's lovely to see that there are a couple of chapters about merchandise within there, because merchandise and franchising has been so important to the Jurassic Park franchise, and in some ways been the lightning rod for a lot of the negativity that's been expressed within academia towards um, Jurassic Park as a cultural property. And it's also lovely that there's chapters in there about the music as well, because the amount of conversations I've had with people, and they always point to John Williams's music and the
Mm.
reproduction of those particular stings or cues, that the infamous kind of Jurassic Park theme. Yeah, it's good to see those elements taken seriously as well.
It's something that the fans will often talk about the music, but might not get very much, scholarly attention. So to focus on this chapter, you specifically look at Jurassic Park fans, and you note from the outset that that fandom has been a little bit overlooked compared to other fandoms. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, overlooked is in some ways underplays it. That there is no prior existing work on Jurassic Park fandom out there. There's a few general allusions made to it, but no kind of in-depth study of it, which is strange if you compare, certainly the economic performance of the franchise in relation to other fandoms that have had a lot of work about them, thinking about like Star Wars and Harry Potter, and Marvel as well being big examples of that. Um, the reasons for I think Jurassic Park has a slightly different status in relation to some of the other ones. For a number of time, or for a number of years up until the Jurassic World films, there was a sense that yes, there'd been two other sequels to it, but they weren't really as good, and that actually, Jurassic Park is kind of like one standalone film that is really in need of any attention there. And I know that the fans would hotly dispute that, because there's a lot of love for the Lost World, and some love for Jurassic Park 3 as well. But yeah, so there was a sense that, well, whilst Jurassic Park had been this kind of commercial box office behemoth, and had developed sequels, it hadn't quite had the same, I don't know, I don't want to say cultural resonance, because I think that underplays it, but it wasn't as deserving of attention in the same way that some of those bigger franchises were. And I think there was also a sense that Jurassic Park gets associated in a lot of audience talk or kind of press journalism with commercialism. That it was a commercial property. It developed a lot of merchandise. It had a logo and a brand for it from the outset. And maybe there was a sense that, well, what can Jurassic Park offer to conversations around the commercial processes surrounding film that Star Wars hasn't covered,
Mhm.
or some of those other big um, you know commercial IPs hadn't covered. So I think there are a couple of reasons why Jurassic Park has perhaps and its fans have not had the same attention. That things seem to get kind of collapsed into this notion that um, you know if you've studied one heavily commodified film franchise, what really can a different one offer in terms of furthering our knowledge about those issues?
Yeah, that's a really interesting take. And I think you've addressed it in a really good way in this chapter, because sometimes in media studies we can get caught up in just doing media analysis, and sometimes we forget about those more empirical approaches to research. And
Mm.
so in this chapter, or to build this chapter, you did a survey of the fans. Who responded to the survey?
The survey was distributed in a number of ways. I contacted the moderators of the Jurassic Park Facebook fan group and asked if I could circulate it there. I used a number of hashtags on Twitter and also a number of podcast accounts asking if they would retweet it, including the Jurassic Park book. So yeah, the aim was to get as wide a footprint as possible from the data, or for the survey, sorry. And it was, yeah, I would say it was successful in doing that. I mean, given the scope of Jurassic Park, or people who identify as being Jurassic Park fans out there, it's, you know, in the millions, if not more, worldwide. Um, we I got 117 responses overall for it. And there were some interesting observations to make of that. You know, perhaps unsurprisingly, the majority of the responses fell in what was it, the kind of 25 to 34 or 35 to 49 age group, which, you know, shows that a lot of the appeal of Jurassic Park is to people of a certain age who probably went to the cinema and saw it first time in the 90s on the big screen, or alternatively were introduced to it, you know, through home movies, through DVD or VHS, or through, you know, the film being on normal broadcast television. So yeah, there was a sense that a lot of the respondents were people who'd had a long-term attachment to the franchise, and that it had retained a lot of the appeal, you know, throughout their life. Basically, it was noticeable that you know, older demographics, people over the age of 50, weren't really responding to or you know, weren't respondents in the sample, which suggests that, you know, this is very much tied to perhaps particular generational identities. It'll be interesting to redo the survey, or to, you know, collect some data in a few years' time, once, you know, Jurassic World as a franchise has kind of spun out and there's the new movie that's planned at the moment.
We could and see if there's a kind of longitudinal, you know, if that bubble of respondents is moving through the pipeline. You kind of mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Were there any sort of major surprises to you from that data? Did you what did you note?
I think one of the most immediate findings was the way that the sample broke down in terms of the gender of responses. So we had 42% of the respondents were women, and that is quite a challenge to existing knowledge out there about um, Jurassic Park fandom and about kind of dinosaur fandom as well, because a lot of the assumptions that have come before, not based on any empirical evidence, it's worth saying, but a lot of the assumptions was that an interest in dinosaurs is something that skews very, very kind of male within this. So to have, you know, almost half of the sample be women, and, you know, dinosaurs being part of their responses as well, was a good challenge towards, you know, those assumptions. You know, on the one hand, we shouldn't be surprised about that. Science fiction in general has, you know, always had a bigger female fandom than perhaps it's been given credit for. But it was certainly good to, you know, to get that data and to be able to push back against some of those points regarding the assumption about who is interested in dinosaurs and natural history and the Mesozoic period, because, you know, there's obvious data that women are as interested in that as men are.
Yeah, and Jurassic Park itself is, you know, noted for sort of certain feminist messages, I guess, and those kinds of things as well. So,
Yes.
yeah, obviously, women will relate to the film, and you're right. We shouldn't be surprised by that, but the perception out there in the sort of wider culture has suggested otherwise. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you, you also noted in the chapter that, and from the survey, that people have really strong, effective attachments to Jurassic Park and the dinosaurs, rather, that they really get attached to the dinosaurs as characters, or that the dinosaurs play big roles in their kind of lives. What do you think that is?
Um, I think that's That's a good question. It was, yeah, it was really noticeable, and in some ways it confirmed my hunch that the dinosaurs were as important as, if not more important than the human characters. Um, but certainly the kind of projection of, you know, characteristics and anthropomorphizing the dinosaurs was interesting, and certainly around the T-Rex especially. You know, the notion that the main T-Rex is known as Rexy, that was very noteworthy, and that people loved Rexy because they're, you know, the icon of the franchise. And that they always seem to kind of come in and save the day at the end of it, which really then came to impact upon my reading of Dominion when it came out, when, you know, Rexy's the one that defeats um what is it,
Yeah,
at
the
the end of it.
Giganotosaurus. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you. Yeah. So that kind of made me smile a lot when watching Dominion and realizing that was the case. Um, so that was very lovely to see, actually, the amount of effect that there is held towards that particular dinosaur. Um, and the raptors as well being kind of key stimuli of both like fear and nostalgia at the same time, this kind of complex intermingling of people both kind of loving the raptors, and, you know, the scene with Tim in the kitchen, and Tim and Lexi in the kitchen, sorry, in the first movie, unsurprisingly being something that was mentioned a lot of the time, but the way that, you know, that people look back on that now and remember being scared and enjoying being scared is something that's really noteworthy.
It's something that I think Universal has understood for a long time about the dinosaurs, and probably aside from the kind of cynical reading of it's good for merchandising, but they've really leaned into that with the more recent dinosaur designs and dinosaur characters, really, in some of the Jurassic World films, and even Camp Cretaceous. So
It's I can't remember if I said this last time I was on, so feel free to cut this if was the case. But there was a sense, or we could certainly read that there was a sense that the idea about developing personalities for the dinosaurs, or individual kind of brand names for the dinosaurs, was necessary from a merchandising point of view, because you could just buy your kid a Velociraptor or something, a T-Rex in any gift shop or toy store that was there, but by like naming them as Bumpy or as Blue or Beta or what have you, all of a sudden they become that specific dinosaur. So that kind
mm,
of warrants and motivates the purchase on behalf of kind of parents or collectors as well. So, you know, rather than having a generic dinosaur model, you know, it's that actual dinosaur. And that was you know, parents weren't willing to pay the premium for, you know, a T-Rex just because it was in a Jurassic Park box when you could possibly pick one up much cheaper. So yeah, the idea about kind of developing brand named dinosaurs for Jurassic World and some of its spin-offs is definitely something that's, yeah, there.
yeah, that's an interesting notion to me, though, because the Jurassic Park dinosaurs, the Jurassic Park T-Rex, the Jurassic Park Velociraptors, the Dilophosaurus have
Mm.
become the templates for those dinosaurs in pop culture.
Yeah, definitely. And this is something that comes up in the chapter is we always need to remember that Jurassic Park is a commercial property at the end of the day, and it does play a role in solidifying people's taste preferences and kind of popular understandings of dinosaurs and which dinosaurs kind of matter and are popular, and it has, you know, put a huge amount of emphasis on, I mean, introducing certainly the Dilophosaurus as something um, that is a popular dinosaur, if, you know, scientifically problematic in terms of the research, and also introducing Velociraptor as one of the, you know, kind of key selling dinosaurs or dinosaur species that were there, that sits alongside things like T-Rex and Stegosaurus and Triceratops as, um, you know, popular commodifiable dinosaur representation.
What role do you think Jurassic Park plays in those wider notions of dinosaur fandom? And this probably is getting back to your last episode, but that's okay.
I think it plays a lot. For some people, it is, one of the first times that you are introduced to dinosaurs on the big screen. Yes, there's a number of different children's animations that use dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are very popular with children in terms of like clothing and their early socialization. But Jurassic Park being the first time that you've seen these, I hesitate to say photorealist, but they are kind of certainly convincing representations of dinosaurs on the big screen, behaving in certain ways, acting as though they are creatures and species by themselves. I think that has immense power in terms of, the awe that inspires about seeing that and allowing you to imagine how you might react in those kind of situations, as well. But it was noticeable from the data that was collected, just how much emphasis people put on enjoying the brief scenes in both Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movies, where you see the dinosaurs just behaving as themselves, without human interference. This I refer to it in the chapter as this kind of zoological disposition, which involves enjoying just kind of observing the dinosaurs on screen in terms of how they might behave and how humans might interact with them, whether that's Ellie and Alan's joy at seeing the brachiosauruses moving in herds, or some of the other sequences in the later Jurassic World, the first movie, where you see the theme park just open and people interacting with and around the dinosaur. So yeah, I think it opens up that space that allows people to imagine how they might feel within those kind of circumstances, and people, it obviously resonates with the fans a lot. Those very short sequences, it's worth saying, but being able to kind of see the park open and observe the behavior of the dinosaurs and put yourself in that position is something that holds great resonance to people.
Yeah. We could do a little bit of speculation if you like, and with David Koch returning to write Jurassic Park 7, what do you think the future of the franchise holds?
I mean, a lot of it'll come down to Universal and whether they decide that this is going to be a reboot, like a hard reboot, and take things back to the start, or whether they're going to continue on from Dominion in some way. Dominion presents, or the end of Dominion presents some interesting points about how dinosaurs and man coexist on the planet, and I think that would be quite interesting. Do we necessarily need to go back to Isla Nublar or Isla Sonar again and have a park that's opening that then or that's open and functioning that then things go wrong with? I know some of the fans would want that because it takes it back to its origins, but it does risk becoming a bit like Uncle Ben dying in Spider-Man however many times that's there. So yeah, I think a lot of emphasis will come down to how they choose to manage what has come before, because there were some interesting things in Dominion about the relationship between science and scientific progress, and the way that dinosaurs might kind of coexist with that, or kind of inform the present, that I'd like to see a little bit more of. Personally, I hope they don't go down the route that's been suggested before about kind of weaponizing and militarizing dinosaurs, or I've seen some of this talk about like the Fast and the Furious dinosaur edition, and yeah, that I think you're taking things away from, Crichton's original novel and some of the kind of scientific discussions that have underpinned the franchise for a while.
Yeah, I guess the notion of plausibility has always been there in Jurassic Park, and you wouldn't want to get away from that too much. Um, just to touch on the Uncle Ben on the Uncle Ben thing and talk about Spider-Man, because why not? I really loved. I don't know if you've seen it, but the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and they touched on in that with Miles Morales, and they touched on in that you can't interfere in a canon event, that all Spider-Men have to go through the death of a close relative. Yeah, so that's and that in itself was drawing on this notion of you can't interfere in someone's canon event, something that'll shape who they are. So yeah, totally off track, but
It seems to be a thing in like kind of sci-fi multiversy, multiple world kind of narratives, that there has to. I mean, Doctor Who's used it about these kind of fixed points in time. But yeah, that all of a sudden, you can't go back and rewrite everything in a timeline, because or else chaos involves. Yeah, so maybe Jurassic Park's Uncle Ben moment is that the park, there has to be a functioning park or attraction in some way that runs AWOL or runs.
And we probably need Ian Malcolm back to explain the various permutations of chaos that might unfold.
Oh, we're always here for some returning characters. Goldblum or Sam Neill or Laura Dern, yeah, whoever.
Absolutely. Ross Gunner, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks to my guests, Dr. Catherine Pugh and Dr. Ross Garner, and also our previous guests on part 1 of this two-parter about the Jurassic Park book. The book is published by Bloomsbury, and they generously supplied me with a review copy for these episodes. Thanks for listening. Find more info on the web at fossilsfiction.co and across social media. Follow and rate us on your favourite podcasting platform. If you have a story to share on the podcast, please get in touch. The theme music is Sonora by Lucas Moreira.